Laughter spread through the Miller Feed and Supply Co-op the morning Susan Reyes walked in to order another round of seed. "Still planting that rock pile out past the creek?" Old Hank Delgado called out from behind the counter, grinning at the other farmers nearby. Susan, 42 years old, dirt still under her nails from that morning's work, just nodded and paid for her order. Prairie Trust Bank had appraised that back 40 acres as worthless during her foreclosure settlement 2 years earlier. Too rocky, too dry, not worth including in the sale. Everyone in the county agreed. Susan kept farming it anyway. What none of them knew yet was that by harvest day, that same rock pile would leave the whole town speechless. Before we continue, tell me in the comments, what state are you watching from tonight? Gravel crunched under Susan's tires as she drove home from the co-op, past the main parcel of her family's original 200-acre farm, land Prairie Trust Bank now owned and had already sold to a corporate buyer. 2 years earlier, a bad drought combined with her ex-husband's business debts had forced a partial foreclosure, and the only piece Susan managed to keep was the back 40 acres nobody wanted. The bank's appraiser had walked that section for less than 15 minutes before writing it off entirely. Rocky, thin topsoil, poor drainage, standard corn and soybean ground it wasn't, and the appraisal reflected that, valuing it at almost nothing. Susan hadn't argued at the time. She'd been too exhausted fighting to keep anything at all. Once the dust settled on the foreclosure, she started researching what could actually grow in soil like that. Late at night, after her day job at the county extension office, she pored over agricultural studies on drought-tolerant legumes and specialty grains suited to marginal land, crops most conventional farmers in the area had never bothered with because the equipment and knowledge required were different from standard row crops. Her sister Renee thought she'd lost her mind. "Susan, that land can't grow anything worth selling. Everyone knows that." Neighbors offered similar opinions, some kindly, some less so. A few even placed informal bets at the co-op about how long she'd keep wasting her time before giving up entirely. No argument left Susan's lips in response to any of them. She simply kept working that rocky 40 acres every evening and weekend, planting a specialty lentil variety bred specifically for poor, dry soils. A crop she'd read commanded premium prices from health food distributors and specialty grain buyers, assuming the yield and quality held up. Nobody in town had ever grown it. Nobody understood why she'd bother trying. Whispers continued through planting season, growing louder as neighbors watched Susan tend rows an unfamiliar crop nobody recognized. Hank Delgado started an informal betting pool at the co-op, most guessing she'd abandon the field by midsummer once the reality of unfarmable dirt set in. If you've made it this far, you already sense something's coming. And if you want to see exactly what leaves this whole town speechless, hit subscribe now, because we're getting close to harvest day. In July, a specialty grain buyer named Marcus Chen, who sourced drought-resistant legumes for a growing health food distributor, reached out after finding Susan's name through an agricultural extension database. He'd been searching for regional growers of exactly the lentil variety she'd planted, and something in her soil report caught his attention. Marcus drove out to see the field himself, walking the rows slowly, checking plant health, testing soil samples on the spot. "This is remarkable," he told Susan, crouching to examine a cluster of pods. "Most growers can't get this variety to establish well in rocky terrain like this. Your yield projections, if they hold, could be significantly above average." Something loosened in Susan's chest, a tightness that had been there for 2 years. "Would you be interested in buying the harvest?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Marcus smiled. "I'd be interested in a multi-year contract, if this first harvest performs the way I think it will." Harvest day arrived in early September, and word had somehow spread that Marcus's buying team would be on site with equipment to assess the yield in real time. A small crowd gathered at the edge of the field, neighbors, a few co-op regulars, even Hank Delgado himself, curious despite months of jokes at Susan's expense. The combine moved slowly through the rows Susan had tended for 2 years. As the yield monitor readings started coming in, Marcus's assistant let out a low whistle. "These numbers are well above what we projected for marginal soil," she said, checking the display again to confirm. By the time the full field was harvested, the yield had come in nearly 20% higher than Marcus's most optimistic estimate. A specialty crop, grown on land the bank had valued at almost nothing, was about to sell for premium prices per bushel, far exceeding what conventional corn or soybeans would have brought on the same acreage. Prairie Trust Bank's regional agricultural consultant, a man named Walter Ostrander, who happened to be reviewing nearby properties that same week, stopped by after hearing about the unusual harvest. He walked the now bare field, looking at the yield reports Marcus's team had compiled, and Susan watched his expression shift from polite curiosity to something closer to disbelief. This land was appraised as agriculturally worthless 2 years ago, Susan said, handing him a copy of the original assessment alongside the harvest numbers. Ostrander studied both documents for a long moment. Whoever conducted this original appraisal, he finally said, clearly didn't consider specialty crop viability. This is considerably more valuable than our records indicate. Hank Delgado, standing at the edge of the crowd, said nothing at all. For the first time in 2 years, neither did anyone else, laughing along with him. News of Susan's harvest spread through the county within days, reaching well beyond the usual co-op gossip. Marcus's distribution company confirmed a 3-year purchasing contract for her lentil crop, guaranteeing stable income Susan hadn't seen since before the foreclosure. Prairie Trust Bank, meanwhile, reached out through Ostrander's office, inquiring whether Susan might be interested in leasing or purchasing additional marginal parcels the bank still held from other foreclosures in the area. Renee called that week, her earlier skepticism replaced with something like awe. "I really thought you were wasting your time," she admitted. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you." Susan didn't hold it against her. She understood why everyone had doubted the plan. Conventional wisdom about that land had been wrong for generations, not just during her appraisal. It simply took someone willing to look past what the land had always been assumed to be. Steady satisfaction settled into Susan's routine over the following months. Though she rarely brought up the harvest unless someone asked directly, she expanded her plantings the following season, teaching 2 neighboring farmers who'd once joked about her rock pile how to identify which of their own marginal acres might support similar specialty crops. Hank Delgado, of all people, became one of her most consistent customers at the co-op, buying seed for a small test plot of his own. He never mentioned the betting pool again. Sometimes the land everyone gives up on just needs someone who refuses to see it the way everyone else does. Susan proved that patience and research beat public opinion every time. If stories like this move you, subscribe, because there's more coming every week.